Hi, everyone. I'm Shaylin Stimson, Events Manager with Tech Manitoba. So I will be your host today for our virtual event, Building a Powerful Network with Bethany Hilton. We respectfully acknowledge that we are meeting on ancestral lands of Treaty 1 territory, the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Innuak, Anishinaabe, Dakota, and Danahe peoples, and the homeland of the Red River Métis Nation. So real quickly about Tech Manitoba, I'm thrilled to be here with you all and celebrate this community that we've built together. So it has been the combined forces of Tech Manitoba, New Media Manitoba, and North Forge. Together with our amazing allies, we're here to create a space where we can share experiences, applaud accomplishments, and champion tech activities in an environment that is safe, gender inclusive, and judgment-free. So one thing that makes our community special is our culture and respect that we uphold. Our code of conduct for events is simple: be respectful, be kind, and support each other. It's a principle we live by, and we encourage you to take a moment to review it in the link shared in the chat. Since our establishment in 2020, this community has grown to over 2,000 members. So whether you're here to network, learn something new, or just meet others in the industry, this is the place for you. Before we kick off today's event, I wanted to give you a couple updates of some upcoming events we have. So our next event will be in person on Tuesday, February 25th from 8:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. So right before the workday kicks off. It's going to be in Studio XR, which is at 201 Portage. And the event is called Discover the Power of Real-Time 3D Visualization. So with this event, you can dive into the fascinating world of real-time 3D visualization and discover how this innovative technology is reshaping industries. I'm going to quickly pop the link in the chat. So if you wanted to check it out, you can take a look at the registration page. This event is going to be part of Manitoba Tech Week. So that is a week-long celebration showcasing the best and brightest of Manitoba's vibrant tech community. So this year, the event's theme is Tech Everywhere, explore how technology is woven into every aspect of life. Currently, we have over 25 events on the calendar for the week. So there's a little bit of something for everybody, all ages, all abilities, everyone is welcome. And then our March event is starting to be planned as well, so keep an eye out for that one. The theme will be Tech and Entrepreneurship with Michelle Cully from Blueprint. That one is going to be March 26th over the lunch hour on Remo, just like this one. So registration's not yet open, but it will be opening soon. And we are also looking for sponsorship. So if anybody here works for a company that is looking to become a corporate sponsor and partner with us in 2025, we'd love to hear from you. Additional support enables us to continue hosting these monthly virtual events and gives us more opportunity to host the in-person events, which are always a favorite. So if you work at a company that could be interested in partnering, if you have diversity in a tech mandate, please reach out to one of the executive committee members, either myself, Tina, or Whitney. We'd love to chat. So I do have my information in my profile, but I'm also going to quickly pop my email into the chat as well. So please feel free to reach out if you'd be interested, and I'd love to hear how we could possibly align. Okay, with no further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Bethany Hilton. She's a dynamic leader and advocate for purposeful collaboration and growth in the tech industry. Bethany is the Director of Corporate Affairs in Office of the CEO at Improving, where she channels her extensive experience with C-level leadership to shape the organization's vision, culture, and innovation strategies. Her work involves forging strategic partnerships and leading initiatives that promote sustainable growth and conscious business practices. But there's so much more to Bethany than her professional achievements. She's a proud dog mom who's absolutely obsessed with her fur baby, Mr. Bugs. When she's not busy leading change and improving, you'll find her traveling the world, exploring new cultures, and diving into her love of dance, discovering unique ways to connect through movement. Bethany is also a sought-after speaker, sharing her experiences on networking, career development, conscious capitalism, and business culture events at events in universities and businesses across North America. Please help me give a warm welcome to Bethany.
Hello. Hi. Thanks, everyone. Thank you. So, if you all hear my dog in the background, apologies. He might want to participate at some point, but hopefully not too involved. Should I go ahead and share my?
Yes, feel
Okay.
free to bring up your slideshow.
Okay.
And while we're doing the presentation, we're encouraging everybody to pop their questions into the Q&A or into the chat. We can do questions throughout the presentation. I'll pop on and ask Bethany if something comes up, or we can take all the questions near the end of the event. Take it
Excellent.
away.
Thank you so much, Shaylin. All right. Well, welcome everyone. And thank you for taking the time to really invest in yourself and to trust me to kind of support that investment that you're making of your time, which is really, really valuable. So, this is a topic that I'm extremely passionate about. It's been such an important part of my career development. And we all know that our careers can shape our life in a lot of ways. So, for me, building a power network was really the way that I was able to develop my career. And I'm going to share a lot of the tips, tools, and even the mindsets that I approached that over the last 15 years. And to give you a little bit of context, I did not go to college. So I did not take a formal education route. Instead, I really worked to develop relationships with people that were leading businesses, that were thought leaders in their fields, and really, that approach, getting to connect with those kinds of people, was the way that I was actually able to develop my career. And so for me, that's been extremely important. And I'm super excited to share as much as I can in this short time. I love questions. Please share your questions because I can't know specifically for you what you're looking for or what you need. And so obviously, my presentation is going to be a bit more generic, but then we'll have time at the end for any of your specific questions. Yeah. So first thing that I want to start with, and Shaylin, if people can post in the chat, just I want to ask, why would we even bother to develop this? There's a reason that all of you showed up today, and I would love to know what you're hoping to do with your networking. Like for some people, it might be mentorship, it might be job opportunities, it might be something related to your work, it could be making new friends. There's so many reasons that we might want to develop our social networks. And I would love to hear from the chat, why even bother with this whole topic before we go any further?
Okay, so it looks like we have a couple people weighing in here. So Margot Miller, who's one of our ambassadors, is saying our networks are so powerful. Tina added mentorship, job opportunity, and also agreed relationships are so important to business. Alicia is saying mentorship and career cadence or guidance and career guidance. Charlotte says job opportunities for me. Andrea, growing relationships.
Love it. Beautiful. Thank you so much. And yeah, feel free to keep going in the chat. But that's really, I think a lot of you all are speaking for everyone in that these are all important for all of us and really important parts of our life. There's a quote that talks about this concept where it's that everything that we know, we probably learned from someone, whether it was someone that wrote a book or created a film or our parents. So everything that we've ever known about the world, every skill we've developed in some way was related to connecting with other people that shared with us. So knowledge, information, friendships, all of that comes out of this. So this skill, beyond just a professional network and building that, this skill is extremely valuable for our lives. So what makes it difficult? I would love to hear in the chat, what are some of the challenges that occur for you specifically around developing, whether it's your business network, whether it's just socializing in general, but what challenges do you find with this?
Okay, so overcoming shyness, finding the right people, social anxiety, feeling awkward.
Yeah. Beautiful. I have given this presentation so many times, and often, almost consistently, these are some of the key things that come up. There's a lot of, which is why we're going to address it in the next slide, in that there's a lot of this feeling of awkwardness. It feels fake or transactional. And I really would encourage that that is kind of the current thinking around it. And I'm going to offer some new perspectives. So we have a lot of our behaviors are driven by mindset beliefs that we have. And I could dive right into tips or tricks for how to not feel shy or how to overcome it or how to express yourself. And certainly we're going to get into that. But at the very beginning, if we just change how we think about a situation, oftentimes those tools come to us naturally. So if I teach you to engage in, which I'm going to in a little bit, but engage in active listening with someone, if I teach you instead to first have a space of curiosity and like, how do we create that mindset in our body that we're genuinely deeply curious about this other human being, then if we have that state of curiosity, we're going to naturally mirror their behaviors. We're going to naturally ask deeper questions. We're going to lean forward with our body language. So I don't have to really teach you to lean forward, to smile, to make eye contact. I can, but oftentimes those are going to naturally occur. So with the current thinking around networking, even the word networking kind of holds like a, ooh, right? Like a, we need to do it, but we don't really want to. And often it's because we all feel that it's a space that feels awkward, fake, superficial, transactional, very much people are just out there for themselves. There's no genuine bonding or connection happening, which leads us to really either half-heartedly networking, like we'll put it on our calendar and force ourselves to go and kind of be a little bit miserable, or we just won't even interact with it at all. And both of those don't lead us to the outcomes that we're looking for. So I want to offer a new way of thinking about networking before we even get into any tools. I want to offer this idea that networking is really just a blanket term for developing personal and professional relationships in a structure. And so a new way of thinking about networking would be that the same way you develop a friendship is the way you can also develop a network. We don't have to immediately, when we meet someone, think about, what do you have to offer? What level are you in the company? What do you want from me? We don't have to start there. We could instead think about, I'm interacting with a human being just the same way I would interact with another friend or colleague. We're not necessarily looking for an immediate payout, some immediate action. So when we take a new frame that we're just interacting with humans like any other human that we interact with, if we think about being more invested in each other and a longer term success strategy and being partners together in this ecosystem that we live in, the biggest ecosystem is the global ecosystem, but then maybe our local city, the business community that we're in, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the things I suggest is when you think about meeting a friend for drinks, or you make a new friend at some party that you're at, and that excitement, that connection, that goodwill that you develop, the looking forward to seeing them, spending time with them, learning about their life, supporting them in the things that they're doing. Why do we cut all of that off and then approach networking as a, oh, hi, we're looking for something. Do you have it? Do you not? Cool, never mind. Almost like people become very, like people become the roles that they are instead of the humans that they are.
So we had some feedback. Karen posted in the chat, and she says she loves this idea. So treating a new contact as a new friendship makes it feel so much more natural and organic and not transactional or fake.
Beautifully said. Thank you for sharing that, Karen. Yes. Exactly. And the way to accomplish this, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, is this personal and professional element to networking. So we don't want to throw away all professionalism and show up in our pajamas and be hanging out, right? But we do want to offer our personal experience, our personal life, our interests, who we are, and also our professional experience. So we want to look at human beings as the whole picture and not just this one part of them. And that can be, when you lead the way in that, people respond so well. And sometimes I will do it very simply, if a business meeting started really fast and we're just in the weeds on 20 different topics about business strategy and all of that, there might be a moment where we get a break and I might say, I'm learning so much about your business and it's so fascinating. And I would love to learn a little something about you. Like, tell me something personal about you. You can say it that straightforward. Tell me something that makes you happy or brings you joy. Tell me about your family. Tell me about your favorite foods. Like, it can be so human. Like, sometimes we just forget that business is just as human as any other experience we're having. Any other thoughts or comments before I continue? Okay, cool. So as we move on, when we're thinking about this new way of thinking, we're going to provide some tools around that. And one of the first things that I want to comment on before we get into the tools is one more mindset piece around a learner's mindset and versus a fixed mindset. So this is a concept from Stagen Leadership Academy that is there's the fixed growth mindset, which says what I know now and who I am is as far as I'm going to get. But then there's a learner's mindset, which obviously we're all participating in that because we're showing up to learn something. But that learner's mindset tells us that the things that we are already naturally good at, there's more we can discover, right? And so in a topic, like a lot of times I'll hear with networking that extroverts are better at networking than introverts. Or if I'm shy or quiet, I'm not going to be as good at networking as someone who's more expressive or loud. And even something like that is a perspective shift, because there's a lot of research done around who is good at developing the deeper connections. And sometimes there's a book called Quiet by Susan Cain that's really good. But sometimes when you are more of the listener, when you are a bit more reticent to express yourself or to take up the attention or space in the room, sometimes you actually can develop deeper connections because you are paying attention. You are noticing things that others aren't. You're watching what's happening and you're not just participating. So I call it watching the game versus just playing the game. If you're playing the sports game, you can't really notice the 20 things that are happening at the same time. But if you're watching the sports game, you can. So taking that approach and knowing that whatever your unique strengths are, if you're really good at getting up and commanding all the attention in the room, that's great. And probably a great path to connection. And if you're very quiet and you're better at just one-on-one asking really thoughtful questions, letting someone else share about their experience, that's also a powerful way to connect. So I encourage people to start to think about their specific strengths and how they lead to connecting with others. And something like being really quiet actually gives space for others to share their experiences, which can be really powerful.
So we do have a bit of a question.
Yes.
Kishana is asking, would it be too personal to ask about family in a business meeting?
So I do not think so at all. I think that there's subtle ways to bring it up. And then there's also more forward ways. So depending on the energy of the room, it's not going to be a one size fits all. If you get into a business meeting and you see they're really wanting to talk business immediately, let that go, right? Like, so allow them to share from what they really want to talk about at first. But towards the end, the direct approach, you could say, like I said earlier, you could say, hey, would really love to learn a little bit more about you as a person, would love to know, about your family. And there's a way to phrase it so that in case they don't have family, right? You can say, tell me about your loved ones, right? So then for me, I don't have children, but I can talk about my dog. And so we wouldn't want to assume, be like, oh, do you have kids? Things like that. So that's a direct approach. A more indirect approach would be to offer the conversation. And I'm going to teach you all this concept of doors in conversation. So I don't want to get into that too far just yet, but you can guide a conversation to lean more personal or lean more professional with the use of open-ended questions. And I'm going to teach you how to do that. So there's other ways to reach more personal conversation without just the direct approach. And you pick and choose what works for you.
There's a bit more feedback on that. So Rufia too also said, I'm thinking so too. Maybe it might seem too forward or awkward. But then I figured maybe if we found a way to tie in what's being discussed before the breakout session to something in our personal lives, maybe it can open the room for a more laid back personal conversation, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. Very, very much so. I think that is learning to tie the two threads together, I think is where it becomes more powerful than just networking, because just talking personal is something we all understand with our loved ones and our families. Just talking professional is something we've had experience with. But finding a way to blend those two is an art. And that's what I'm here to teach you. But first, that context of that mindset that this is what we want to approach, that we want to have a whole picture of the human being. And part of the reason for that is actually professional success, because I'm sure so many of you have been at networking events where someone's like, "Oh, hey, what do you do?" And then you tell them and they're like, "Well, if there's anything I can do to help you, let me know." And in that moment, it's like, "Well, I have 3 pieces of information about you. How would I have any idea either how I could help you or vice versa?" So instead of asking that question so soon, which doesn't really lead to anything in my experience. Instead, if I get a whole picture of like, oh, your son's going into university right now and he's passionate about, animal rescues, and oh, you're traveling to Monterey next week for a business trip, and also this is the stage that your business is in. When I get a full picture of you as a human being, there's so many ways I can contribute value to your life. That could be as simple as, oh, my friend's a water polo instructor. I didn't know your daughter wanted to learn. So those kinds of things. So yeah. Any other thoughts or questions before I carry on?
And then Sandra was giving an option too to try an opener like the weather or the commute, non-commute, or something like that in a meeting. Wondering what your thoughts are on that kind of like conversation. It's funny because I know we were talking about the weather, but
Yeah. Well, okay. I'm loving these questions. Thank you all so much. So one of the things that I've noticed with the weather and small talk, I used to hate it. I'd be like, no, let's just immediately be like, tell me your personal values and tell me your greatest fears. And then I realized that small talk actually allows us to develop safety with each other. So when we think about it, 70 to 80% of our interactions are actually body language, tone, and we're looking for a couple of things. And this is from the Charisma Myth, which is a great book. We're looking for your competency, we're looking for your safety, and your goodwill. So if I am talking to you and I really want to help you, but you don't really feel that I have the ability to do that, you don't fully trust me. Or if I have so much competency, you're like, wow, she's really smart, but you don't feel that I genuinely care about your well being, you don't feel safe. Right. And so in small talk conversations, when we're chatting about the weather, when we're saying whatever random things about the coffee or the food, what we're actually doing is assessing our animal bodies, right? Our psyche is assessing subconsciously, is this person safe? Do they have my well-being in mind? Are they capable? And so all of that's happening. Therefore, if I'm aware of that, when I'm in these conversations that are just small talk, instead of caring about the content, I'm caring about the conversation that's happening deeper than the content. So when we were laughing about the snow in Winnipeg and whatever, I'm paying attention to the human beings in front of me and the energy that we're exchanging and the laughter and the connection, where we're telling each other, listen, I care about your experience. Do I care deeply about the temperatures here versus there? Maybe not, but I genuinely care about what you're experiencing. Does that answer the question?
absolutely. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Shaylin. So now that we have a little bit of this perspective and mindset, when we're going into these conversations, we're looking at the whole human being. We want to know them both personally and professionally. We want to offer them safety and the space to let them know that, hey, we're capable of what we're talking about today, and we also care about you as a person. There's this quote I love, that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so establishing that is always a really great place to start. And it really does help with nerves, because all of us just genuinely want to be seen and cared for and experienced. And so if we're offering that to someone else, that is going to immediately lessen the tone. We don't have to bring as much posturing. We're like, hey, we're human beings here that all probably have some loved ones at home, and we've probably got a favorite coffee. And like all of that creates so much safety for us to then embark on this partnership of networking, business, finding ways to support each other in that world. Now, how do we establish some behaviors that we have this genuine desire and interest to connect with these human beings? We've thought about them as a whole person. We want to do that, but we don't want to just straight up be like, hi, I want to know something personal and professional about you, because that's going to be great, right? We need some tools to support us in that. Some of the tools that I want to offer are around active listening and powerful questions. Now, there's books on both of these topics. I'm just going to brush a little bit on the surface. Again, if you look up these Chat GPT, there's so many books, there's ways to really dive in, but I want to just offer you an introduction. Active listening is a space in which you are genuinely and deeply engaged with what's happening. So we all know, we all know the difference between someone who's like there but not really there, right? So they're making eye contact with you, they're hearing what you're saying, they may even be responding to what you're saying, but deep down you just feel like they're not really listening. And this happens a lot in romantic partnerships where someone will be like, I'm listening. You're like, no, you're not. You're not listening to me. Like, you might be hearing me, but you're not listening. And so I want to offer you some tools for going from just hearing what's happening in the room to actually deeply listening to someone. And when we deeply listen to someone, we actually start to develop understanding of who they are. And the more we understand someone, first of all, the more connections we can make into how we can support them or how they can support us. But also, we get to really connect to the human being and we get to care about them. I feel that even if we don't agree with people, the more that we understand where they're coming from, the more we can offer them care, empathy, and the dignity that every human being deserves, right? I'll pause there if people have questions before I go into kind of the differences. Good? Okay. So, the first difference between hearing and active listening is hearing is accidental. So, like if my dog starts barking, you weren't intending to hear him. You don't really care about what he has to express right now. But active listening is a very intentional form of hearing. This is where there's a lot of other things happening. You might be in a restaurant and there's a bunch of noise and chatter, but you're leaned in, you're listening, you're making eye contact, you're letting this person know I'm here with what you're saying. And one of the ways I can tell when someone's actively listening versus just hearing is if there's someone that starts to say something and they get talked over or whatever, which happens, the person that's genuinely actively listening will track that. And will be like, hey, you were about to say something. Hey, what? Or like you started saying that. What were you saying right then? And so that level of attention to the people that are sharing, and even starting to notice when they are about to share something and they hold themselves back, right? So that's intentionality where you're like, I am here genuinely interested in hearing what you have to say, and I'm present with you. I'm listening with my eyes, my ears, even my body language, right? Then there's involuntary versus voluntary. Involuntary listening, again, you're just it's happening and you're just there for it. Voluntary is where you have made a an effort to be like, my presence, I'm going to offer not just my hearing, but also my presence. I'm going to pull in all those thoughts of like, I've got to make dinner and I've got to be somewhere in 10 minutes and who's texting me. And you're like, I'm going to be here with this human being. I'm going to offer them my full presence and attention. And that is a gift in itself, because how often do we even experience that? Even if I don't ask you a single question, but I just listen to you fully and completely, and I honor what you're saying with my listening, that is really beautiful. And again, we talked about the effortless versus focused. Any questions around that? Excellent. Okay. So I'll carry on. I don't know if any of you have seen the TikTok slash Instagram reel that was going around of we listen and we don't judge, where everyone's, family members are talking to each other and sharing these secrets. And then they say, we listen and we don't judge. So that's a really great little mantra that I've offered myself recently, where it's just we listen and we don't judge. When we listen without judgment, to someone else, this means even positive judgment. We don't make a judgment of that's good or that's bad or wow, that must be awful. And when we offer that neutrality of perspective, when we just fully listen, we get to allow the person that's sharing with us to color the experience for us. So they might say, wow, it's so cold outside. And instead of us being like, oh my God, must be awful, we'll be like, oh, how do you feel about the cold? Right? Like we don't immediately assume and project, which I think is a little bit further down. We don't necessarily assume and project our experience onto theirs. When we listen without judgment, we don't decide if it's good, bad, neutral, something they want or not. We allow them to tell us. And that's a skill that, if you've ever been to therapy, is something that you see why people are so capable of opening up in therapy and going deep into their psyches and their healing journey, is because they are offered this space where I'm not going to tell you what's right, wrong, good, bad, or even necessarily what I would feel in that situation. Hopefully that makes sense to everyone. I'm going to take some water real quick.
Yeah, lots of people so far have just been saying yes and absolutely agree. So all on the same page.
Great. Awesome. And we talked about this one a little bit, the awareness of projections, but the genuine desire to connect and understand. This is something that we have to work at and remind ourselves, even before you're going into a networking meeting or a business meeting, giving yourself 3 minutes to like set the frame for yourself of what is my intention? Like, I'm about to meet this human being. What is my intention with meeting them? Not like, yeah, you might have a sales goal or recruiting goal or whatever, but like, what do I want to offer them as far as my presence, as far as connection? What do I hope to create? Because in any interaction with a human being, there's my energetic field, yours, and then the one that we blend together. So that third entity that we're creating, the connection between Bethany and Shaylin, right? That is its own thing. And how am I caring for that? And what intention do I have for that? And then awareness of projections. This is what I spoke about a little bit, but we so easily and so often, we are meaning making systems. And so we're going to project this is good or this is bad. This is how I feel. And we'll notice it all the time. Something truly tragic can happen, and someone will share what happened to them, and we will immediately, over their experience, be like, oh my God, that's horrible. Wow, that's so awful. But we don't actually give them space, even for themselves, to know what do they feel about the scenario. And so noticing when we're projecting or inserting our own thoughts about something, our own feelings about something that was not our experience. Certainly, if we had been in that situation or had that experience that they're sharing with us, if it was sitting in traffic, maybe we'd be super angry. But maybe for them, they were really vibing because they had a great podcast, right? And the reason that this is important is because when we are aware of our projections and we can hold them back, we allow people to bring more of themselves to us instead of overlaying ourselves onto them, if that makes sense. Should I continue? Any questions on that one? Awesome. Context awareness. This is something that's really valuable. And I think a reason why we try and research before we go into meetings, obviously, maybe in a networking context, you wouldn't have a chance to research someone that you're just meeting. But getting context for people is so valuable because we are all such a collection of all the experiences we've had over our lifetime, which then create our unique view and perspective of the world. So when I'm speaking to you from a lot of context about my own life. And for you, the more that you are aware that there's way more context to what I'm sharing, you can ask really good questions about it. You can sometimes even guess at it a little bit, right? but being aware that there's so much more present than just what's being shared. There's cultural backgrounds, there's stories, there's upbringings, there's parenting. There's so many things that created us. And that's just another deeper level as well. And then offering respect. I think it's so easy to other people. It's so easy to be like, I'm this and you're that, and we're different. But offering this respect and dignity that every human being we encounter, it has a deeply fascinating story, a deeply interesting lifespan. There's so many different human beings. We are all very much the same and we're all very different. And so offering that dignity and respect, even that, just that goes such a long way to building a beautiful connection with someone, because you are seeing them from a place of deep regard for who they are. And also, I'm sharing all of this with you, but please don't judge me if we're ever on a call and I'm not able to do all of these things, because these are really deep and powerful tools that take a long time to hone, and sometimes we forget. And so, definitely, I'm working on these just as much as all of you are. Okay. And then I wanted to talk a little bit. How are we doing on time, Shaylin? Okay. Well,
I think, yeah, we have like 10 more minutes or so.
okay, great. Excellent. Excellent. Okay. So, powerful questions. Now we're paying really good attention, we're listening really well. And then with powerful questions, this is a way to lead the conversation, like we talked about, into more personal or more professional spaces, depending on what balance we're looking for. Sometimes in a conversation, people are too focused on personal, and it doesn't feel like you're getting to a context of what they do for work and all of that, and vice versa. So when we're looking to ask people questions, we want to ask them questions that offer contemplation, that are a little bit surprising, that are going to create some sort of dynamic, right? We don't want to ask, and of course we all do it, but like, how are you? How was your week? Instead, we want to ask questions that are open ended, that are going to encourage them to go look for an answer inside of themselves, right? For them to start a story of some sort. So if I ask you, how was your week? You can just say good and we're done. Or if I ask you, what was the best part of your week? Or what was a highlight for your week and a low light? These kinds of questions that invite a story are going to tell you so much about a person, about their value set, um, their experiences, what they care about, all of that. And when you ask an open ended question, then people start to tell you a story. And when they tell you a story, this is the concept I was sharing a little bit earlier, they start to open doors to other questions you can ask them. Because if I right now start telling you a story about my life, and I let you know that I grew up in New York and I have 10 siblings, which is true, and I moved to Dallas for work, though that conversation right there, if you were to just randomly ask me about my grandfather's pottery business, I would be really confused and it would feel really awkward and out of balance. But because I never brought that up, but anything that I bring up, there was some sort of subconscious agreement or offer for you to ask me about that. So if I share about my grandfather's pottery business, then absolutely ask questions about that. But what happens is when you ask an open ended question that starts a story, in that story, I'm going to be, even unbeknownst to myself, subconsciously telling you things that I would be okay with you asking me about. And so, it because I brought up the 10 kids, you can ask me, your next open-ended question could be, "Oh, wow, what was your experience growing up with 10 kids?" Or, "What did you enjoy most about that? What was most challenging about that?" And if you ask questions like that, it's very natural for me to then go into start talking about something deeper, which is my experience with having so many siblings. So, this kind of pathway, I think of it as doors, that in any conversation, we invite you to open certain doors into our world. And that's the way that you can keep going. And within 2 or 3 questions, you can go really deep because I mentioned my 10 siblings. You can ask about my experience, challenges with that. And then I can share something that was challenging. And that might be something that I haven't shared before, or I didn't know I wanted to express, or I have a realization for myself. And so when we're asking powerful questions, we're not just trying to get to know someone else, we're also trying to help other people get to know themselves. And so that process of we get to know you, but in the process, you get to know you. And that is what leaves people after a conversation feeling deeply seen and also leaving with a nugget of their own. So I wanted to try and practice with the group a little bit. And then I have a bunch of just smaller little tips and tactics on like what kind of networking events to attend and what to do, how to get out of a conversation if it's challenging. I have all that, just some fun little things there. But first, I would love for us to practice, and you can just post in the chat if you had to um, if you had a powerful question, right? What would you say if somebody starts complaining about their life or tells you a story about their family? What's a powerful question you might pose after they tell you that? They tell you someone says, "Oh, I work in I'm a director of technology for a software company." What's a powerful question you could pose with that? Any of these if you can.
Okay, so Rafiatu was saying, what do you love most about it? Or
Beautiful.
Kishana says, how many team members do you manage? Oh. Or Andrea, how is your work-life balance? And what about your journey to this role? What was your journey to this role like? Wow, lots of answers.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well done. And oftentimes, what and how questions are really good ways to start, right? That's sometimes why can be a bit intense. Like, why did you choose that? Feels different than what do you enjoy most about it? Yeah. What about if someone tells you a story about their family? They're like, oh, yeah, my daughter just got into high school at this whatever, or she just joined the badminton team. Like, if someone's telling you a story, what um what's a powerful question you could ask?
Takes a couple seconds for the answers to come in, so
Absolutely, that's
I'll just
totally
wait for
fine.
some of them to load. But there's lots of great what questions that came through for the last example. Oh. Okay, so an example from Ella is, how are you adjusting to that?
Nice. Any others?
Not yet.
No.
There was one from earlier too, and I'm curious what you think about it. And it's less of like a what or a how, but more of a tell me more about your company.
Yes. Okay. I thank you. Whoever put that in. That phrase, tell me more, is so powerful. If I start telling you a story and you're listening deeply, and then you just say, wow, tell me more about that. What it does is it's not even a question, it's more of an offering. It's a, hey, I want you to go deeper and I'm willing to go deeper with you. So, love that. Great, great way to respond to really any of these. And you also get to see where people take it, right? So if I take it in a direction of like, was that challenging for you? Immediately, I've decided I want to go for the more negative experience. Or was that positive? Versus if I just say, tell me more about that. When you do that, they get to choose. You see where their brain goes next, right? Cool. Awesome. Um, so I would encourage you to practice, and definitely resources are such a great place to books and even chat gpt. You can ask for open-ended and specific questions. That was the other point I forgot to make, is that we want to make sure the questions aren't too broad, because then again, if it's just like, how was your week? That's an open-ended question, but it's not specific. And so it almost becomes overwhelming. We would rather have a little bit of specificity of like, oh, yeah, it's really cold in Winnipeg right now. What's it like navigating daily life around that, as opposed to like, how's the weather? So, yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Okay. All right. So, just a quick recap. I love this quote so much. And I have a few friends on the call today too, which is really sweet. But like, the difference between two strangers and two friends is someone had the courage to go first. And I would shift that quote. I don't remember whose quote it is, but I would shift that to being the difference between two strangers and two new business contacts or new business partners or new colleagues is someone had the courage to go first. And so, whether you're going to do it perfectly, whether you're going to fumble or make mistakes, that genuine, authentic reach for someone else to say, hey, I'm curious about you and your world and your experience. I want to offer you a space to share. And maybe I don't perfectly set up the space, and maybe it's a momentary glitch, and that's fine because I'm the one that's having the courage and authenticity to invite you to be yourself. And then again, it's not just about you, right? These connections, this partnership that you're developing with these people, it's about us. It's about the two of you and the thing that you're creating together. And when we think in these long term strategies, when we think about, we don't even know right now what 10 years from now we might need, or what kind of things we'll be interested in. And so you never know who you're going to want to know and at what point. And so everyone is a valuable and beautiful connection, not just the people that you think have the thing that you want. And then the behaviors we went over. So I have many resources around this, and I would encourage you to reach out to me if you have more questions about these things. But one of the things I love to discuss is, if you're at a networking event, time management. So if you want to meet multiple people, if you're in a conversation and you start to go really deep, but then you're like, whoa, I didn't sign up to be a therapist, or I really need to go talk to someone else. There's a lot of ways to navigate those kinds of conversations. One of them is, again, I kind of try to give like the direct approach and then the indirect approach. So the direct approach to leave a conversation is as simple as like, when there's a pause, and I always encourage not to interrupt the person that is speaking. I encourage you to interrupt yourself. So if Shaylin shares something about her life, I don't want to be like, cool, great, I gotta go. But I'll be like, wow, thank you for sharing that. Here's something else I wanted to share about my experience. And by the way, I'm gonna need to go in a minute. And so I use the phrase concept of interrupting yourself when you want to say goodbye instead of interrupting someone else. And then that's a way of prepping them also, instead of just being like, and now I'm going to leave. You start by saying, hey, this is what I'm sharing. Oh, by the way, in a minute or two, I need to go. So that's one phrasing. And especially if you're at a networking event, you can be like, I've really enjoyed our conversation. I do have a few other folks I'm trying to say hello to before I leave. But I really enjoyed connecting with you. And so that authenticity, the phrasing does matter. You can practice, you can have a few tools in your back pocket, but being that direct often is very valuable too. And then follow up. So when we when we meet someone and we put all this energy into actively listening and asking powerful questions and learning about their world and seeing this complete picture of them, that's 1 hour, 1 30-minute conversation. It's not enough. So we actually need to develop some sort of follow-up system for people that we want to really create more momentum with. And if we do a lot of that up front, right? We don't have to like every month for the rest of our life email every person we know with some, form letter. But what we can do is realize that when you have a new connection, it's more tenuous. So you want to shore it up with many different interactions. So if you just met someone that you were really inspired by at a networking event, immediately invite them out for coffee to continue the conversation. And then maybe a month later, encourage them to come to an event with you or to get connected into something you're doing like this. So we want to make sure that we're having more touches at the beginning with a new connection, because over time, like if I've talked to you over the last year, you know, many times, it's unlikely that in 5 years you won't remember who I am. So we want to build those strong connections up front that then over time those stay. So I still have people that when I started my career 15, 16 years ago, I can still call up if I go to my hometown and we're going to meet up and chat because we developed that relationship years ago, but it was strong enough at that time that I might not have talked to them in 5 years. Hopefully that makes sense. And I get this question a lot, so I just wanted to preemptively share it with you all. Networking events and the right kinds and different groups to attend. I always get that question where people are like, what kind of events should I come to? What are valuable and worth your time? And I have a few hot tips for that. One is that some of the best networking events I found are typically events that are information based or collaboration. So if you're going to hear a state of the city, or if you're going to create a task force to, help clean up the streets or something, when we're doing something together that's not directly just networking or socializing, when we're building something together, learning something together, creating something together, that actually gives you something to circle around that makes it a lot less forced, a lot more authentic, more opportunities to connect in the future. And typically you find people there that would not necessarily just come out for a networking event. So I highly encourage information-based collaboration, volunteering, all of those kinds of places as a space to develop your network in a more relaxed, authentic, and powerful way. And networking events, you can absolutely still attend. That's great. But I've just found that I've had more success at other events. Any questions before I kind of close out?
Thanks, Bethany. I mean, the one that you just touched on was one of the ones in our Q&A. So they were saying they're a newcomer, they're struggling to find networking events. What are other ways or locations to find these? As an event planner, I want to just chime in real quick. So look at your local communities. So something like Women in Tech, great place to start. Other associations related to where you're working. So I know New Media Manitoba hosts events. So does North Forge and Tech Manitoba. Going back to the event that I put in the chat earlier, I know Manitoba Tech Week, there are tons of events on that calendar. Lots of them are free and lots of them are networking based too.
Excellent. Yes. And when you're interacting with people, asking them what they're going to and then going with them. And a networking event doesn't always have to be a networking event or even business related. You can be in a coffee shop and make a new connection. You can go to a dance class and make a new connection. When you start to blend personal and professional, not fully, right? We still have boundaries and all that. But when you start to be willing to see a whole person in their personal experiences and their professional, then we don't have to just meet our business contacts in a business meeting and our friends in a friend situation. So we can have friends that are our colleagues. We can have business connections that become personal friends, right? All of that can kind of blend together. And I do want to say that one of a powerful networking tool actually is to share your network with others. So it wouldn't always seem that way. There's often this concept of like resource guarding and all that. But actually, if I say, oh, Shaylin, I know somebody that is a really valuable connection for you, I would love to introduce the two of you. Even if I'm not in that meeting, I thought about them both. That was building a bridge to both of them. And when they're in that meeting, the first thing that's going to come up is Bethany. How do you know her? What's it like? Right. And so one of the ways when we're genuinely generous with sharing our network, the people we know, and helping others around us, it ends up helping us because we continue to be known as that connector and to be seen as someone who's invested in the community and supporting people. And also, I know these are more like random questions that I get a lot that I just wanted to get in front of. But another thing is keeping in touch and having a system for that. When we're in these conversations and we're asking powerful questions, we're getting a lot of data about someone. They're going to tell us stories. They're going to tell us where they've been, where they've lived, maybe little details that are important. Sometimes they'll mention their dog's name or their kids' names or schools, right? All of those details actually are really valuable to remember. And so, one of the things that I recommend, especially when you're just starting your networking, is to just create a Word document or a note in your phone. It could be in your contact, right? Just write in the notes on them and just write in that information about them. And then when you're reaching out to them again, you can just quickly scroll and be like, "Oh, their daughter's name was Daniela." So instead of just being like, "How's your daughter? Hope her schooling's going well." You can be like, "Hey, hope Daniela's schooling is going well." And so that personal touch, one, it helps you remember them better and you feel more connected to them. But two, it also gives you more reasons to reach out, more information to share with them, and vice versa. So that's a great way to actually support your keeping in touch is if you take a few minutes after meeting someone to write down some of the things you learned about them. You'll be more likely to think of them for things. You'll be more likely to know what to reach out to them for.
Awesome advice. Thank you, Bethany. If you want, you can stop sharing the screen and we can go through a couple of the Q&As. But up next, I have Isaac. So they're asking, as a skilled and effective communicator, do you adjust your approach when speaking with someone who may be a bit more socially awkward?
Ooh, yes, definitely. I think what I would do in a situation like that is to allow space and room. And so, in the concept of socially awkward is just whatever the rules of societal engagement that we all agreed to, they're not following. So if it's you're supposed to blink at this time or laugh at this moment, or you're supposed to phrase it in that way. And so honestly, the social skills often are like the gift wrapping to make sure that the present is still whatever it is, that beautiful heart, that beautiful human being underneath it. And the social skills are kind of the gift wrapping that we show up with. And we're like, hey, it looks like how it's supposed to look. So when I'm interacting with someone that has a bit more, maybe, just a bit less socially comfortable or approaches it differently, I bring that mindset and remembering that like underneath that they may not know how to communicate all the things but they probably have something really beautiful to share. So I'll offer the patience um and just roll with it. I think like, if they're asking two personal questions, you can respond but make it funny of like, wow, that's really personal, I'm not open to sharing that, but if you want to answer that, I'm happy to right. There's different ways to make it playful, and to also realize that if they're socially awkward, they probably realize that to some extent and are trying really hard to connect. So for you, it might be a simple connection and you might be like, ugh, why is this happening? But for them, they might be pulling all their resources and their courage to have this conversation with you. So I think I don't really have tools around this, just a mindset that when that's starting to happen, it's like, cool, awkwardness is just an experience. And like, we can just be here for it and be grateful that they're trying to bridge the gap to connect.
Absolutely. The next two questions are pretty similar. So I'm just going to lump them together. They're from Tina and Tina. So what advice would you give your younger self in regards to networking for the first time, which also is very similar to what advice would you give for students or fresh graduates that would like to network? And it feels overwhelming at the start, especially with someone who has no experience.
Ooh, yes. I love this question. Thank you. So, for students, I think that they are in such a key position to network because they're not actually looking for anything yet and they have no experience. And what people with a little bit of experience love to do is to talk about themselves and their experience and share their wisdom. So when you are young and you are just out of high school, college, you are in the most optimal position to network. I went to the Inc. Our company won for the 15th year, the Inc. 5000 fastest growing company. So I was in Palm Springs a couple weeks ago or a month ago, and there was an entrepreneur that had paid to send 10 college students to this event. And first of all, they really stood out because they're the youngest by like 20 years. They have very little business experience, right? And one of the 19-year-old boys just went up to this multi-billion-dollar speaker and was like, I would like to interview you. I'm a college student. I'm learning. Can I interview you? So the rest of us didn't get to talk to this guy. He was leaving the stage. He didn't care. But this guy, this 19-year-old got to sit down with this multi-billionaire and interview him because he's like, I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm not trying to partner or collaborate. I'm genuinely here to learn. And a lot of humans want to invest in the next generation. So I encourage college students and high school students to lean into that, to be brave and bold, because even if it comes off weird, like those 50-year-old CEOs are going to be so amused and so excited that you tried and your bravery to show up. And so I highly encourage that. And I also suggest, if you think about being in college class, you might have 400 people that are all going to graduate in the same year with the same degree in the same community. And then they're going to go and fight for the exact same jobs in theory. So what is the thing that you're doing to differentiate yourself? How are you showing up? And one of the things I say is that, like, you building those personal connections is a high differentiator. If I have to read through 400 resumes, I'd rather just hire the person that called me on the phone or dropped off some cookies and a resume, or that I met at a networking event. And so college students, this is the time. And that imposter syndrome, first of all, it never goes away. But second of all, that imposter syndrome can be turned into, I can embrace the fact that I don't know and that these people genuinely would want to help me.
That's such a good point. Like, that's the one time in your life where people know that you don't know anything. Because once you get into your career and you have a couple years experience, people sort of have more faith in you and they expect you to know things. But when you're a student or just graduating, you can totally lean into that.
Yes, absolutely. And you can also offer, like, you can make crazy offers. You can be like, hey, listen, I'll work for you for free. I want to know what you know. I'm full time in college, but I'll come to your offices and I will clean your desks if you will tell me, if you will let me sit in on your private equity meetings. Like, you can ask for the craziest, most brilliant things that someone 4 years into your career, you have an image you need to maintain, all of that. So, yeah. And so I guess in answering the second part of that question, the advice that I would give myself is to lean in even more, to do even crazier things. When I went to a conference in Chicago when I was 19 years old, and I wrote 200 handwritten thank you cards to it was all a leadership conference. I wrote 200 thank you cards to these leaders by hand. I had energy. I was 19. I had nothing to do. And I found all their addresses and I mailed them to them. To this day, if I wanted to call those 200 people from like 15 years ago and talk to them, I absolutely can do that. And all that was is they were like, oh my God, that college girl that wrote all these handwritten cards, you know? So
That's amazing. Yeah, that going above and beyond and like starting to build your personal brand, but being bold enough to do things that everybody else is too lazy to do, even.
yeah. And you're not paying rent and you don't have 3 kids and you have the time more so. Right.
Absolutely. Awesome. That's all of the Q&A. I mean, lots of questions were answered throughout, which was amazing. Thank you so much for your time, Bethany.
Yeah.
We're getting lots of thank yous in the chat here too. So
Thank you. I do have a few resources to share. I always love to give a few
amazing.
books because books are, a whole one author that might be their life's work and you can read it in 2 days, right? So the two books that really influenced me, one of them is really old, but it was the very first book I ever read, and it was How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. I don't know how perfectly socially on point it is anymore, but that one really, really brought a lot to my life. And then the second one is Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi. That one's the first one is much more heart and like mindset oriented. The other one has so many tips and tactics, like the conference bump, like all of these concepts that are really brilliant if you're looking for strategy. And then, of course, please consider myself to be a resource if you want to reach out. Also, I don't know if Margot is still here, but Margot Miller, I think is her last name. She did a TED talk on networking that is brilliant. I highly recommend you check out her talk, and she also gets into online networking, which is really, really great. And then I would say that this group itself is a resource. You all have incredible knowledge and information to share with each other. So you're already practicing just by being here. So spend the time, get to know each other, and feel free to reach out to me. LinkedIn is probably the best way. But you can find me on all the platforms. So yeah, thank you so much for your time and attention.
Awesome. And yes, a huge thank you, Bethany. Thank you for sharing your practical strategies, inspiring perspectives, and how to build meaningful connections. You've given us so much to think about. Thank you for the recommendations of books. Those are amazing. I know I read the first one, so definitely recommend as well. We're so grateful that you joined us, your energy, your passion for this topic of networking and career growth. And thanks for reminding us that connection is a heart of everything we do and to keep it human.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for inspiring all of us.
Thank you. Thanks for coordinating everything and leading us along.
Yes, absolutely. So we're going to go back to the networking floor. The doors will stay open till about 1:15. So if you want to pop around and make some new connections, feel free to, or feel free to pop that in the chat as well. Thank you, everyone.